What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Hopefully welcome back. Little girl's out here. She wants to play. She wants to play all day. So I just had some thoughts. I'm gonna basically do what I'm gonna refer to as a pretty like a random video. I don't have a script here. I don't have any specific thoughts set out, but if you're thinking about moving off grid or doing an off grid project, I kind of want to go over some stuff, things that I feel like I would have done differently, things that I wish I had done sooner. And I'm just going to start here. So I've got 2 dogs. This is one of them. And as you can see, I'm doing land clearing and excavation out here. This is all dirt. So there are going to be times where if this is what you're doing and you're living on site, it's going to be all dirt all the time. And maybe you don't have a driveway set up yet. So your vehicle's covered in mud. You're covered in mud. These dogs are covered in mud. And you've got to either stay, in a tiny house that you've built or a camper or whatever it might be. You're going to need what I'm going to call, a safe space or a sanctuary, if you know what I'm saying. And this is one thing that I should have done in the beginning that I did not do. So look what we got here. Very simple, not a large area. I love the river rock. I love the pea gravel river rock. And not only is it visually attractive, it's also functional. These dogs will come off of the dirt or a walk or whatever, feet covered in mud. This stuff helps knock the mud off their feet. If you want to grab a hose, having water is important. Obviously, if you're going to grab a hose, rinse their feet off, you can get the mud off their feet. That way, you're not exhausted from doing all this work you're doing, tromping through mud all the time, and then having your pets or even yourself just tromping mud inside. I feel like if I could do this all over again, the very first thing I would have done would have been to create a nest, if you will. Something like what I've done here, where it's just a small spot to where this is the home zone. It's completely separated from the rest of the project. You've got a clean place to walk around and all that kind of stuff. And then, some of this is common sense. Like, you're going to need water. You're going to need power. And I know this is an off-grid channel, but getting a well done is expensive. And you need to know where you're going to have that well, and you need power for it. So, I'm about 150 foot above the road here. I'll kind of come over to the side. You can see how steep this hill is. This property had someone living here about 30 years ago, and they just have public water out here. We're in the middle of nowhere, but they do have public water. Maybe this would be a good time, if you have that available, to get on public water until you can get your well put in. Get yourself some freeze-proof yard hydrants put in, and you can do what you got to do in the meantime. So even if you don't want to be on the grid, it is very affordable to get on public water if it's available. So that's what I had done, and then touching on the whole power situation, there are a lot of really great dual fuel, tri-fuel inverter generators available on the market these days, and they're pretty affordable. Like what I've got here is a discontinued unit now. It's the Duramax 4500 XPIH, 3500 watts continuously running on fuel, and 4500 peak watts. This thing does everything that I personally need, and I can run a Lincoln 140 MIG welder off of it, which is a good basic small general all-purpose welder, but it gets old fast. I was very, very resistant to solar. It's something that I wish I would have done a long time ago. And you can do stuff like what I've done here, which is just what I want to call a real cheap gateway into solar. This is one of these Pegron E3600 LFPs. You can get this on sale right now for like $1,250. It's got a 3,000 watt hour battery built in it. It can accept 2,500 watts of solar, and I've added these server rack expansion batteries, so I've got 13,000 watts of I'm sorry, yeah, I got these are 5,000 each, so I've got 13,000 watts of stored power, and then you can use whatever you get off of solar. But my rambling point is, get on solar as soon as you can, because that generator running all the time will just work your last nerve. This is something I just did a video on installing this washing machine in here. I've been hand washing clothes for 3 years now, just because I didn't want to just stick a washing machine outside under a tarp. And my problem is I want to work on a project that I think is meaningful and get it done, and then I'm willing to sacrifice the quality of life in the name of progress, if you know what I'm saying. So I've been washing clothes, hand washing clothes in this 110 gallon tub of sorts that I got from Tractor Supply, and I would have been much better buying a secondhand washer and just throwing a tarp over it and running the generator on it. And then obviously you can't do that in the winter, but I'm going to have to heat this space because of these lithium iron phosphate batteries. So, and then this thing does create heat too. When you're bringing solar in or you're charging it, it does create heat. So this thing's in here now. I know this space is going to be heated in the winter, so I can run this washer. This is going to be a game changer for me, especially during the winter. So, get yourself a decent space. Make sure you got water. Try and get on some solar. And you're going to be exhausted. It's going to be a lot of work to do this stuff. And if you're not eating good and clean, and you can't get a shower, and you're hearing a generator running all the time, and washing clothes is laborious and time consuming, your life is going to be a lot more difficult than it needs to be. So one other thing I'll touch on is, I'm sure you're hearing the dogs barking in the background. I've got 51 acres here, and then over this way there is a small 1.9 acre parcel that I border on 3 sides. When I originally purchased this property, there was a dog over there. I guess a family member or two moved in over there, and they have a zoo over there. So there's a bunch of dogs barking out all the time. I'm a dog person. It doesn't really bother me that much, generally speaking. But if you're looking at a property, walk that whole property, because whatever's on that property is going to be yours when you buy it. And then whatever's going on with neighbors is going to be going on. Now, people, I always say, are not static. They're very dynamic. So in that situation over there was a dog that was barking a little bit. Now it's 14 dogs that are barking a lot of bit here and there. So check this whole property out and, see what you're getting into, and you may not always be able to come by at night, because if you're looking at raw land, it's really not appropriate to just be out on some piece of property that's just for sale at night when you don't know who the neighbors are, and maybe they're watching out for the property, or maybe they're not. I don't know. But that, in my opinion, was the thing that I messed up on the most. Now, I've done a lot of work here in regards to land clearing and excavation. All of this used to be trees and a bunch of different shaped hill. You can see I've got, that is, a decent driveway that's in place. And then I've done quite a bit there was a bit of a driveway here. It wasn't suitable and it was very washed out. Somebody has not been living here on site for 30 years, so this stuff can get away from you pretty quick. So, you know, if you need to have a driveway put in, you better have an idea of how much something like that's going to cost. I've done all this on my own, but gravel is very expensive and it adds up quick. So be very realistic on what your expenses are going to be. I've only put down the number 4s. I haven't even followed this up with what I'm going to call a top coat, which would be 57s or crush and run. And I'm close to 200,000 pounds of gravel. And most guys are hauling 20-ton loads, 18 to 20-ton loads. So, you know, that's a lot of loads. And you're paying for a delivery fee, you know, on every load. So keep that in mind. You know, if you're going to have a 1/4 mile long driveway like I got, it's going to get expensive quick. So what I've got going on here is I'll throw a couple of photos in so you can get a visual. So this whole piece of property that I have is just under 6 acres. And then I've got 45 acres back here. So I personally suggest that people buy as much land as you can afford within reason, because you don't really know until you get here what you're going to end up doing. Your plans can change. I know my plans have changed a lot. When I originally purchased here, this part that we were on, I was basically going to, you know, have a driveway to go up here. I was going to put a big shop or a pole barn up there, and I didn't really have a plan for what I was going to do here, but I just wanted to clear it out and have an area with some grass. If I wanted to do a big garden up there, or I considered doing a sawmill there, and you could do whatever you wanted there, but you do need some space that's cleared out. I love the woods because nature takes care of itself. If a tree falls down out here, it's no big deal. So my plan was to make this road that I'm doing through the woods to get to what I refer to as the way back. And I wanted to put a house in back here. But when you're one person and you're doing all this work by yourself, you realize very quickly that you've bitten off more than you can chew. So whether you're one person who's doing it all by yourself, or if, you know, maybe you're a couple or a family and you're going to be hiring some of this work out, you may find yourself in a different position to where you have people to help, and maybe you're learning how to do this stuff, which is fine. Maybe you did not plan on hiring people. Maybe you planned on hiring people to do all of this stuff, but now you're over budget and you don't have the money that you thought you were going to need to do this stuff. So what I would say is, whatever you think that you're going to need, you better add a considerable amount of money on top of that budget. Whatever time you think you're going to need, you better add a lot of time on top of your timeline that you have existing in place. And you've got to be very mentally, emotionally, and financially flexible. You're going to need to be able to accept all the setbacks and overages and timeline slipping away from you. So if you think that, you know, you're going to get into something like this on a shoestring budget and make it work, it's going to be a rough ride, you know, because I tell people, a big quote that I use all the time is, there are no new fundamentals. So if you do like I did, you buy a big piece of property that is what I guess a realtor would classify as steep rolling hills, which this is. You know, if you look around, it is nothing but big, crazy hills and transition changes. And if you can excavate a road through something like this, it can be a very beautiful property. You know, you can see that this is a huge ravine going up onto a big hill. You know, I had to fill this in just to get across. Okay, so we're talking about just getting to the other side of here. Huge achievement. So you can get land like this for a really good deal, but you know, you're not getting it for cheap, or some people will call a good deal for no reason. You know, you're going to have to either do some serious land clearing and excavation, you're going to have to pay somebody to do some serious land clearing and excavation. And the prices on that stuff really varies. I know some people who have hired what I'm going to refer to as some good old boys, and that can go good and it can go bad, and it's typically a mixture of both. If you want to hire a legit company, it's going to get wild. Like, I know a guy that does land clearing and excavation, and he said it could be as much as 10 grand an acre depending on what they're doing. So that's something to think about. I've heard of people who know somebody getting a guy and a machine in for about $1,000, $1,500 a day, you know, but it's just still one guy and one machine. And I've cut this road in myself using my track loader that we walk by. That machine will do a lot, but it's not easy. Like, let's say you got an excavator with a hydraulic or a mechanical thumb. This tree is falling down across here. You can just come out, grab that thing and move it. Now, if you want to move that using the track loader, you've got to hook a strap or a chain up to it and drag it somewhere and limb everything up. It's a lot of climbing on and off the machine, and that stuff wears you out, you know. So it's one of these deals where it's just a lot of time and a lot of work, whether you're going to do it or somebody else is going to do it. But this property, I walked this whole property, and it's what I'm going to call very beautiful and very treacherous, because trying to put a road in on a hillside like this is no easy task. But once you have this road in and you can see what you got back here, I've been on this project, I guess, for technically 4.5 years. The first year that I owned this property, I didn't live here. I've been living here for about 3.5 years. Having 45 acres that you can barely hike through, you've got something that you basically can't even see or touch. It's a little tough. It's a little tough. I mean, if you look in here, it's thick. You can hike through that, but you're just eating spider webs and covered in bugs and all kinds of stuff. It's not a nice hike. I mean, you could cut a trail and hike that trail, but I mean, these ravines are wild. Like, from where we're at here to down there is probably 100-foot transition change. And then I own everything on the other side of this to get from down there to the top of that hill, about 200 feet. So, you know, if you're out of shape, you're going to need to be able to get into some kind of shape. I'm fat, but I'm physically able, if you know what I'm saying. I like to snack. I don't drink or do drugs or any of that stuff, but I do like to eat. So I got a little belly on me, but I can do some work, if you know what I mean. So anyhow, you gotta buy something that you can use. And if you're not going to be able to afford to hire somebody to put a road in, you're going to need to be able to do it on your own. And it's a lot of work. The work is very dangerous work. And it's very time consuming. But if you really do want to be off grid, or you want to be way back in the woods, and it's something that you've experienced and it's something that you like, you already know that there's nothing else like it. And I'm really looking forward to completing this road and being able to get out into these woods. It's hard to see much anything out here this time of year. Once you're into late fall, early winter, you can see quite a bit, and it is very beautiful. So this area is going to need a lot more work. It's far too steep at this point to, drive a car up or anything like that. This is pretty much just a rough cut in. My neighbor's got an excavator with a mechanical thumb, and we're working a little deal out to where it seems like I'm going to get this thing up and running again and help him do a little work with it. And in exchange for that, I'm going to get to use it a little bit. I'm getting a little out of breath here just because of the extent of this hill. So if I'm huffing and puffing a little bit, cut me some slack, homie, because it's pretty steep. But if you're looking at equipment, track loader is a very underrated machine. Not a super popular machine, but you can do quite a bit with it. And I would say the next most useful machine is going to be an excavator, especially if it's got a hydraulic or a mechanical thumb. You're going to really be able to do some stuff with that. So I did all this with that track loader. Getting up to this hill, I mean, you can't even imagine how difficult this was. I'm just a self-taught operator. I jokingly say that I'm YouTube certified. And it was a breath of fresh air to get to this point, which is essentially the top of the hill that we're on right now. It goes a bit higher, but this was basically the target that I was trying to hit, and I was able to create what I'm going to call a fork in the road. So I've got property that extends down and around there and around back to where we came from, and then it goes out this way and way around. So I'm going to eventually have a road that goes that way so I can get up there, and then right here up on the top of this hill was where I was considering putting a house. So being able to get to this point and just being able to get back in here to see what you got is a real big deal. Having all this property and not being able to see it without, your best bet is like, this is a deer trail here. If you're not going to hike a deer trail, you're pretty much out of luck. So anyhow, this is just a couple of things that I was thinking of, just to recap. You might be really gung-ho on getting all the work done and working on this road or whatever, but at the end of the day, you know, you need to get back to your tiny house or your camper or hotel room, whatever it is that you're living out of while you're doing this project. You need to be able to get a shower, wash your hands, get something to eat, get into bed. You know, if you're not able to run AC through the night and get a good sleep, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? If you're not well rested, well fed, and clean, it's really going to affect your performance as far as getting the work done goes, you know. And I know some of this is common sense for a lot of people, but if you're kind of like me, where you're a workaholic and you are able to get obsessed with a project to the point to where the work comes before quality of life, and you're okay with it because you just want the results, you need the results, and you're willing to run on empty to get it done. I mean, this has been this has been such a journey for me, and I've been very obsessed with this project to the point to where I was basically willing to be on a 3.5-year camping trip to manifest my dreams, you know, if you know what I'm saying. I could see this stuff in my head, and I wanted to see it with my eyes, and I wanted to see it with my eyes bad enough to where I was going to put the project first and put myself and my quality of life on the back burner. But the ugly truth is, at some point, what I want to call long-term burnout sets in, and you're going to find yourself in a ditch that you almost can't get yourself out of. And I've been there. There have been times to where I had worked so hard for so long that I was in a position to where I was so exhausted, I really couldn't do anything. I would get up, wash some dishes, get back in bed and lay down, get up, wash some clothes, get back in bed and lay down. And I don't know if everybody is going to work to that point or not, but if you're the kind of person that wants it bad enough to where you're willing to work that hard, you may find yourself there. And once you're that tired, it's a long road to get back to normal, if you know what I mean. So I feel like I would have been able to perform at the level I was performing at more comfortably if I would have had a more stable and comfortable environment to go home to, if you know what I'm saying. And I've always been big on home cooking. I don't really eat out, so to speak. Like, you'll never see me at a fast food restaurant. I'll go to like the Mexican restaurant or something like that. But so I feel like, you know, I might be eating some junk food, meaning like chips and salsa or chips and queso or pie or whatever, but you're not going to see me at McDonald's, you know. So I'm going to eat some junk food, but not that kind of junk food. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is just a, a rambling video, if you will, but I feel like living off grid is a life I never knew that I would enjoy. I used to think I was fancy when I was younger, if you know what I'm saying. And when I had moved out, I sold my house and moved down here and put a tent up in February with my dog Lily, and we just started doing it. I actually took 2 years off and then just, did this stuff for 2 years. But yeah, so going from having a hot tub at an air-conditioned shop and a cleaning lady that comes every week and a nice house and all that to this was a big change. And for me personally, I wouldn't want to go back. I really like this, and I think it's worthwhile. I don't know what the future holds for people or society or whatever. I'm not going to get too in the weeds with that kind of stuff. But, you know, I think that there's going to be a paradigm shift coming. You know, nobody has put any emphasis or value into having land like this in recent history. You know, a lot of people would rather have an eye patch apartment in New York, pay $5,000 a month for that, and you could have all of this for much less, and you could sustain yourself on this. Like, I'm not a homesteader. I don't have chickens, and I don't have a garden, and I'm not canning stuff. I would like to be doing some of that stuff at some point, but that's not going on now. But I don't know. More isn't always better, if you know what I mean. But in this context, I couldn't imagine not wanting to have this 51 acres for what I paid for it compared to what you could get in a neighborhood somewhere. It just, to me, seems silly. But, you know, you wouldn't know, because not a lot of people would think to buy a big piece of property like this and do what I'm doing. You know, it's hard to get a loan for a piece of property like this. I had to get a commercial loan to get this property and put a lot of money down, pay a higher interest rate, because the bank doesn't want a piece of land with no power and no house on there. It's not something that they can liquidate quickly and easily. But I think it's been worth it, and I've enjoyed it a lot. And like, this is obviously the track loader I was talking about. This is an older machine. These are going to require frequent maintenance. They are going to be breaking down. So if you can't do the work, you're going to need to be able to pay somebody to do the work. But I got a deal on this from a friend of a friend. I got this thing for $12,000 about 3.5 years ago. And I put a lot of money into it, but I've done a tremendous amount of work with this thing. For 12 grand, you can't even really get a 5,000 pound Bobcat, and this is a 34,000 pound track loader. This thing will do crazy amounts of work. If you wanted to get like a 10 or a 12,000 pound Bobcat, maybe it's 60-80 horsepower. If you want to get something like that used, you're looking at like 25 to 40 grand easy. So an older machine like that, very minimal electronics, can do a lot of work for you. You can learn how to run something like that, but you do need to be able to work on it. Like that thing, if you need to move that, the only way to move that is with a tractor trailer, with a lowboy trailer. So it's not like when your car breaks down and AAA tows it to the shop. Somebody's got to come out here and work on it. You can't just kind of take it somewhere and have it fixed. But I guess the key points are, you know, make a nice space for yourself, get the solar going, enjoy the peace and quiet. You don't want to hear a generator running, and eat good, you know, and have a nice spot to go home to at the end of the day when you're working. Maybe you're working a 9 to 5 and you're doing the work on the weekends or after work or whatever, but it's one of these deals to where, you know, you can't pour from an empty pitcher, so to speak. So you got to take care of yourself first. But I enjoy being out here, and it's not always great. You know, I'm in Eastern Tennessee, and the heat just broke. It's been in the 90s every single day for a while now, and we're dropping down to the 80s. It looks like for a week. So it's a very welcome change, and I'm looking forward to maybe being a little more active than I've been as far as projects go. But if you're thinking about moving off grid and maybe doing a project like this, put some time into the planning and really consider the budget. consider where you want to be, who's going to be around you, how much space you're going to need, and maybe you just want to get the property, just attain the property and kind of stick it in your back pocket. And maybe you don't get started on it right away, or maybe you just clear a little spot, go out there and do some tent camping or put a pop-up camper out there or whatever. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. You don't have to do it all at once right now like I tried to do. It was probably a bit much, but I think I'm going to end this one here. If you got any questions or comments, you know, drop them in the comment section. If you don't mind subscribing, that'd be a big help. About 50 subscriptions from having 1,000, which gets me monetized. I'd like to do some fun stuff with this channel. And you know what? Unfortunately, you know, you can't have a happy, productive, fruitful life without money. So the more money you got, the more options you have. And I'd like to get that rolling on this thing. So I appreciate y'all, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.